Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Nasher's 360 Speaker Series. I'm Curator of Education, Anna Smith, and today I'm pleased to introduce artist Damián Ortega. Damián Ortega began his career as a political cartoonist, a vocation that, when executed well, translates wit into criticism. Ortega's works continue to function at the nexus of humor and keen observation, often deconstructing or repurposing everyday objects, highlighting the social or political implications of the common things that populate the world around us. As you can see in the images behind me, Ortega draws poetry from the commonplace, fashioning a universe out of hand tools, transforming tortillas into building blocks, dissecting a Volkswagen to tease out its socio-political history. His works merge reality with possibility and encourage us to re-examine how the relationship between objects creates meaning. Ortega has had solo exhibitions at the Institute of Contemporary Art Philadelphia, Kunsthalle Basel, the Tate Modern London, MoCA Los Angeles, the Centre Pompidou Paris, the Institute of Contemporary Art Boston, and the Freud Museum London. He has participated in the Venice Biennale in 2003 and 2013, the Sao Paulo Biennial in 2006, and the Havana Biennial in 2012. He was nominated for the Hugo Boss Prize in 2005 and the Preis der Nationale Galerie für Junge Kunst in 2007. He lives and works in Mexico City and Berlin. Ortega will be sharing recent work with us today in which he plays with data, infograms, graphics, and logos. We're so pleased that we could bring him to Dallas, so I hope you'll all join me now in giving a warm welcome to Damián Ortega.
Thank you so much. Can you listen well? Thank you. I'm really glad. I really appreciate because a year ago, more or less, we received some of you in Mexico in the Jumex collection in the museum, and it was a pleasure. And like today, and I love the possibility, and I feel this privilege to have this exchange through museums and through artists and collectors. Well, I also appreciate that you introduced my work because sometimes I carry with all these years of working, and sometimes it's not easy to go back to the big origin. But if you can, we can start with some. I think it's here our control. We can give a quick review of the works, and then after that I can show my new pieces, new productions, projects. It's here already. You want to take a look of the previous works, or is okay just to start? Well, let's go directly to the new productions. Last year I did a show in the gallery in London, White Cube Gallery, and it was a very exciting and complex moment for me, as I think everyone in the earth, they will say, because it was a very problematic weather situation with hurricanes, with earthquakes and all these natural phenomena, plus some period of elections and a lot of questionings, newspapers. All the people was watching every day the newspaper to see what was going on. And I was really obsessed with the watching newspapers, and I feel a lot of nostalgic or reference to my previous work as a cartoonist. I try to involve some politics in the pieces, but really I will try to don't mix like some propaganda or some statements. It was more about the feeling as a human with all these external influences in our daily lives. Then I started with conceptualizing the show, doing some posters, some graphic images to amplify it and put it in the gallery as a statement or as a research. Then I used the title of the show, named Playtime. is a reference with a movie of Jacques Tati, a filmmaker from very experimental, very popular in France, who did a very crazy allegory and metaphor of the modernism. Then I decomposed the machine, and I did a plan as some instructions to follow. Some maps of the invented area, but with some sentences about the fragility of the movement from one place to another, like sentences put it on some areas in the plan. Like I remember one who said, you can come back to your house because your house is not your house anymore, and you are not anymore the same. And then it was also this one with decomposing the camera, and you can read a sentence through the numbers. And it was a nice experience to say the object is not only an object, it's a process, it's a decomposition of feelings, and how can you classify feelings, waves, movement, energy. It was interesting to follow the way of reading the image. Some interesting concepts of how the technology, and lovely the relation with the exhibition upstairs, because how sculpture is a technology, and how sometimes we try to express or transform the reality with all these tools, and how is the history about doing cybernetic works even with the steam machines. Then here was some other. And finally, how to mix these pieces, more like a graphic, bidimensional, with some three-dimensional sculptures, how to translate all this language into the objects. And then, for example, very literally, I use an encyclopedia, a British encyclopedia, which my grandmother gave it to me, and I try to give it to my daughters, and they don't like any more books. They only want the computer and the laptop, and we have this beautiful, amazing object with a beautiful paper, drawings, graphics. And I said, what can we do with this? Because it becomes a little bit like a nostalgic, and will be interesting how to transform. Then we took with my team in the studio, we took every volume like of the books, and we start doing some figures, some spheres, and cover it with one after another to create and to produce this kind of process of time, a kind of tree, a kind of stone, create after all these layers of knowledge, after experiences, after literature, and finally create these memorable stones. They are the 23 volumes. And it's a beautiful thing because you can open it and see what is the letter A, B, or C, or whatever, with all this graphic information in the. Of course, it was a little bit difficult in the beginning to start cutting the books, because it becomes really radical and crazy when you have a beautiful piece of stone or even a piece of wood. It's important this moment when you decide to cut and to create some new thing. but this is another piece in the exhibition who was a packing of very regular packing of sculptures in the if you fly to any of the art fairs, always you see thousands or the biennials, thousands of these crates beautifully done with inside some packing and packing and packing, and finally you find a small piece of art inside. And then I thought it was a great joke, as a philosopher or writer in Brazil said, the best ideas, or the origin of the best ideas is a joke. And I thought could be interesting to use the negative space of the boxes for commercial industrial supplies, kitchen supplies, and do some cast inside to create one figure after another. And I think it's not only the joke. As many of the times I decide to start it by intuition. Why I decide to do it? I believe the joke or the humor is a strategy to amplify our knowledge, to understand a lot of situations, a lot of problems, and go deeper, because you don't have the barrier of the conventionality, and then you can amplify your knowledge. Then I thought it's interesting also like cosmogony, how from the center an object creates some universe, or from the universe creates some focus, some stone or some information inside. And the sculpture is not only the object; it's the context, and the complete space. This is another one: mixing materials, cardboard, plaster, silicone, latex, many different. And also was like a very strange materials, like shapes more like cities or technological figures. Also this one. Here, for example, the relation about the stratigraphies or the relations. This is what I test was, why not let's do some pattern, some reference of the images in the newspaper, but not the dramatical ones, not the figure of the human figures, and let's go for the information, more like statistics, graphics, and this kind of information. And I decide to do it in a clay with glazed. And it was just percent. The figure of the sculpture is just information. For example, this one is also the statistics of how some companies are growing or expanded after the 1 year of investments and reactions. Then you can follow all of them as a percent if the business was going up or going down. But finally, it was the material was very giving the human scale of the informatic or the data, because the glaze is a very beautiful system of mixing materials, and you can produce in some way like the periodic table of the elements. You can create one color, one shape, one texture, or another completely different, or even it's like the union of two persons who create a third member of the family, and you create a big language just with the mix of two elements. Then all the elements, all the glaze was different. I use a system to give to each piece a very different texture and color. Here is another experiment. I did pieces in clay also, but I didn't learn. I decided to do the spinning table with my hands, doing the form of this kind of industrial pieces. Maybe here you can see better. It's clay with some stone, and all the pieces are part of the process of learning how to do a pot or a bowling or a circular piece. And then I create the experience and finally the memory of how percent or how many days took me to do the piece. Then it was interesting to create a record, and the piece as a record of itself. In the show also was this clock, was my own clock. It was a nice story because a friend of mine, Gabriel Orozco, a famous, well-known artist, received years ago a watch from another well-known artist, Spanish, Juan Muñoz, and he gave a clock, and he said, take this one and give it to some younger artist. And then after years, Gabriel gave it to me, and I supposed to do the same. I didn't, but I will do it. But I decided to open it and to separate all the pieces and reproduce in a large scale. And the title of the piece is Cutting Edge. In some way, it was a nice experience, as other pieces which I did, like to split the complete object, because sometimes we thought an object or something is just a unicity, a unique single object, and of course it's made with thousands and thousands of different small elements. And then for me it was interesting to decompose this figure and classify it, understand how it works, and make a zoom to amplify it. I used the original watch was a Russian clock with the hammer and the axe, like the sickle. And in some way, it was beautiful, the idea for me to understand a clock is also part of the technology, and it's a knife also to cut the time, because the time is a fluid, is a complete, a continuous element, and the clock divides the time in slides and in seconds, in hours, in minutes, and it was interesting, the idea of also every object becomes a technological object and also a tool. Some pieces and some pictures in my studio, which always is a big challenge, because in the studio, the pieces always give some charming, some special touch because of the context and the specificity of the space. But it's interesting always how to transport this energy or the pieces to a different context. I prefer to show always the pieces in process. I like the fragility of the process, how it's more related with inventions. This is the one of the most newest ideas for me, because I took the infograms from the newspaper when describe time and how to classify, to understand and divide as a schema or as any kind of problem, and divide it in percents, in statistics. And I did this huge piece with cement, pigmented in different colors. And the interesting thing for me is every element, it means something. It has some specific content. And this is the original infogram, the diagram. And it's a very silly description of a football game. But I thought it was amazing, the idea of classified and distributed in the space to describe 90 minutes divided in every 5 minutes, and at the same time divided in two different teams who was playing. Then I thought it was more about the capacity to transform time, space, and produce some volume also as experience. And it was a kind of coliseum, kind of stadium, with and the information is about if it was a penalty or it was a fault or different, how it was the score of the game. The blue ones it was for one team, and the pink ones with gray was from a different team. I was curious about how the abstraction and how minimalism or sculpture can be also the place for information. There is a complete show of the exhibition, view of the exhibition. Here, I bring this beautiful experiment which I did in the workshop. It's a very simple mix of three different materials, A, B, C in each corner, and every triangle means is a full percent, 100%, or 95, 90, 85, 80, and going from one material to another. Then you can see the difference is huge. I put numbers to identify them, and you can go from a very cracky, glossy material, a bit more matte, and finally a thick, deep, thick paste. Then it's interesting how it's just the percent of the material. And it was the thing, it was the complete structure for the different colors and materials in the exhibition. Also the mix of colors, which is just 5 different kind of colors, oxidums or natural organic ones, but a mix with in different percents. Also, I thought it was a very metaphorical thing about the human, how this all this the data, the information was translated in phenomena, specific phenomena in different in the human relations. I think it's the only one. Now, the most recent piece which I'm working is after the show with the infograms and all this data. I thought I found a beautiful book about logotypes, and it was interesting for me because I thought it was a beautiful, clever images, very pure, and I tried to understand how this design was influential, or the sculpture was influential to the design. Then I select few of them, which are really great design, bidimensional. This. And I did some sculptures with this, which is interesting because at the end it's like a nice dialogue between, but the experience is completely different because the sculpture is a human, is individual, is eccentric, is material, and it's the symbol of the individuality, as in my opinion. And the other side was a bit like the opposite, like a corporative, a sign of the industry, a sign of the many different elements who was different. Then I did a very rough materials. I always prefer to do it in this way, very handmade and directly. And the idea is to do a show with all of them, expose it in a big garden, in a big plaza, outside of the Garage Museum in Moscow. In a large scale, but not that big. I think it's interesting to play with the human scale, to create more a relation with the object, more friendly. And sorry for the pictures, I'm not that good. And for sure will be interesting the relation as a body with all these modernist sculptures, and I will use materials for construction. For example, rough wood, plywood, all the materials which are common, metal bars, to give some idea of recycling elements, to give a new life. Oops, I think it was the last one. A new life as a kind of flea market, when you can buy maybe a beautiful clock, a watch, or a TV or whatever, but it's still in use, and you can give a new chance, a new life, a new perspective in the to reused, maybe in a different way. But I think always is interesting this relation about when an object becomes obsolete, have a second life, maybe in a different context, in a different place, and restart again with the possibilities of transform the space. Then I don't know. I think I did very quick. Do you want maybe to see some of the previous works? Because can we do it? Thank you. Of course, will be interesting the idea to recycling materials. For example, the plywood, all these things which are common in constructions, and give this idea of mold for the pieces. Sorry. Yeah, great. Well, maybe for some people who didn't know the work, I started with a very deep interest. I will go back. Can I control with this also? Yeah. Maybe I think this one was one of my first pieces, which I feel it was a mature idea and interest. It was very common, ordinary peacocks, with which I decided to cut it in small slides, with a piece of leather inside, to create a very flexible handle, as a little bit organic or a natural, maybe an animal shape, who also was a contrast with the metal part of the head of this tool. I like the idea of a contradiction of the object, a contradiction of the technology, of my own feeling about what my possibilities and my chance to transform an object, which as we talked before, a beautiful stone, a beautiful book, and you can destroy and transform in something else. And then it was the contradiction between the transformation about the to preserve the objects. Then was a kind of peacocks with contradiction of being not rigid, being more flexible, more and less impositive. And the title was Tired Peacocks. A few years later, it's coming. A few years later, I did this piece, which becomes very popular in many ways because I think was not only focusing the art people in the art context. Well, many of the visitors or the guests in the museum was just families who wants to share to the father wants to share, to teach the son how it works the beetle or to tell stories about how they have won a car, similar car, and they went for a travel from one place to another. And then also in the arts context was interesting because in some way I think the idea to hang pieces, it was interesting to use the complete space, also the height, and to make very lighter, very diagrammatic, very schematic description of the complete thing. Also, my idea was to describe a big system, a kind of political system, or complete. To see the big picture of the object, how every piece was important, how in the system was that important, the small piece than the biggest one, and one of them was connected to another in a beautiful way, and it was more like a communication system instead of a functional system. Was really nice when you connect. You can see as a diagrams in my book, which I used to have. When you learn how to do it by yourself, how these pieces was connected one to another one. Then this piece was went to Venice in the Arsenale, which is a beautiful context. Because it was industrial, very at the same time very emotional in Venice, and in this moment the news of the Beetle of the company of the Volkswagen said we will not produce anymore the car. Then it was exciting, like we have a fossil, a very powerful symbol of the history of the technology of the human relations. And about movements since Germany, than the hipster movement, or that the workers use this car, and then many information related with this car was interesting, and people was really engaged with it. Another piece previous is this one, which is made with tortillas, which is a very, very common thing in Mexico. All the country, we have tortillas from the south to the north, and I decided just to toast or to burn it, to make it rigid, and to create this kind of shape, just to ensembling all one to another. In some way, a very mythical idea of create a cell or a molecule of a new molecular structure, and it's related with some mythology in Mexican, also like from the southeast of Mexico, who say the human was made originally by God, by different gods in corn. because they tried first with stone and it was too rigid and cold, and they tried with wood, but it was fragile, and they decided better let's do it with something soft and warm as the corn. Then I thought it could be nice to do this structure. The piece was shown in the Tate Modern, and it was really fun because after 2 days we had a big invasion of ants climbing through the plinth to the piece, and then we need to remove the sculpture. This is another maybe like a silly piece because I did it. I classified the complete corn with my one by one, because my idea was to use the system of or the typical shape, the mix one to another, or the relation one to another, to build to create a big wall, maybe like a big organic system expanded in bidimensional. Then I tried to classify it, and I put in my box, and years later I found it. And I thought, well, only this one would be very nice piece. It's interesting. Now I'm developing something else. I will go back so quickly. I am working now with a lot of with the idea of corn, with the idea of preserve the biodiversity of corn, because we have a huge diversity, 64 different kind of, and now it's a really problematic or complicated law to protect, because with the big transgenic enterprises, they can cultivate just one variety. And then it will be really a shame, because it's a different 64 different variations, and then people are really worried to preserve, to don't permit only one single variety. And I think it's a very political statement, and I think many people are working to preserve and to create a nicer law to protect. Here's another piece made in a gallery, very experimental, which I appreciate, because not every place can support a project like this. It was some rabbits in the room of the gallery, with which was the canals reproduced the floor plan of the gallery. Then rabbits can eat and drink water every day, and eat, and of course transform the space after a few hours, and readapt and remove all the space. Then I like the idea of water, of the maybe the white color of the rabbits in the white background of the floor. Create something very organic, very natural, a little bit like a wind doing erosional the gallery and the space. The title of this exhibition was Rules and Instincts and Rules. Rules and Instincts. Another idea is a mix which I prepare just to describe some experiments, which I love to do it, using some organic materials, some daily, everyday objects, plus or with some other stronger, more refined, and mix how every element can give a new experience to the fusion of these two elements. I mean, I never had the idea of high class elements and low class elements. I think it's important to give the voice for everyone, and to create these new objects. The sculpture is an invention of a new world. And then I I did this object with ginger, with transformers, and mixing with clams and with different organic materials, because I read something amazing. How in the future they speculate we will not have stronger or rigid materials, because, for example, for going to the space. Instead, that they propose to have something more organic, like a cell who can renovate the surface, more like a body who can create new cells to keep to recycling the material. Then I went to the market and I found in one side the fruits and vegetables, fish, and the other side all these toys made in plastic, and I did the fusion of those. This piece was in Italy, what maybe you know is an amazing tradition of glass, blown glass in amazing factories, and I decided to take one of the pattern of the Coca-Cola bottle, to do 120 variations, and then we classify from the top side, the medium, or every part, and we did like a 12 variations of each part of the bottle. The guy was a big master of into the factory. Then it's a really playful and happy experience. Also about the diversity. Like many times we learn the body, the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle was a reference, part of the success, supposed to be, because it's a feminine reference of the shape of the Coca. And then I thought, well, it could be interesting to play with the idea of how many different bodies we have and how many different we are to create this diversity. It's another piece also in Venice Biennial. I did it before, but it was interesting to put with the Beetle car. And it was these 3 barrels used for oil containers, and it was in a platform who was spinning. Then it was moving like this in a very, very fragile, slowly, but create a very fragile and risky experience for the audience, because you see it was moving and it was maybe that dangerous, and it's related with the price of the oil, because maybe like the Mexican depends a lot of the price of the oil. And then it was this fragility, like every day you can see in the newspaper if it is going down or going up the market of oil. Then the title was like a stability and growth. Another piece who was originally collected all the tools in Germany. I used to go every Sunday to the flea market to find all the antique tools. And I hung for all of them from the ceiling to do this exploded view, this explosion, based in something interesting. Who was in the center? You can go through the space, through the piece, and from the center, in the eye level, was all the pieces hung. Then you can see always through your eyes, see one tool. I mean, if you stand up in the center, you can see to above or to the top, and always you have a tool in your this hand distance. Then I thought it was interesting, the idea of our perception. Maybe my glasses give me a perspective of technology. I'm watching only technology. I'm transforming everything through through some tools. Even the glasses are tools who give and transform the objects, transform into ideas, transform in words, transform in society, and transform everything. And then it was in some way like the pico cansado, the tired peacocks, also a kind of love for the tools, but at the same time fear for them, because it was our sorry, just one. Yeah, I don't know if it's clear. If you stand up here, all the perspective is through one of these angles, which is the chance to see through the space. This is another experiment in Sao Paulo, which I asked in the gallery to buy few thousands, I can't remember exactly how many, thousands of bricks, very light ones, square ones, square size, 20 by 20, and we received all of them, and I started to do it installations every day. Every day I did one installation, and we took pictures, and next day we disarmed the installation and we made another one. Then the idea was to give to the brick the sense of atom or like a molecule, the smaller size of the smaller element into the building. Then it was a kind of an atom to produce this solid, liquid, or gas. And also it was a very interesting, the idea of the object is not important, it's more the complete performing the action, the recycling objects and create different environments and pieces. This is another piece in New York was installed. And I went to London and also to Paris, and I saw this beautiful obelisk and from Egyptian, and I thought how impressive is the power to move from one big stone like this to bring here the piece, and how important symbol was the idea of take the stone, this verticality, and go closer to God, and take it as a political system, as a political statement from Napoleon or from Hitler or from whatever to move this system. And I like the idea of do it with some grass in the bottom and over some wheels, then to change the point of reference. Let's say when you make an appointment, you say, let's meet in the clock, or let's meet in the corner of somewhere. And if you move the corner, maybe you have a different open mind. And it was also a discussion about monuments and colony and also the sculpture. When a piece which is already installed in the modern Tate is these floor plans of the most important, maybe the first three buildings, modernist buildings, by Le Corbusier, by Oscar Hansen, and in Latin America by Mario Pani. And I did it in Berlin years ago when I moved from my Mexico City. I had a small house, and I went to Berlin where they give me in a residency. They got me a very big apartment, and then just in my room, in my living room, I can fit my house. And I thought, wow, it's really big. I can imagine the toilet and the bed is here and the kitchen, and I thought, well, it will be interesting also to see the scale of the intimacy of these apartments, of the historical apartments of modernism, to understand the scale of human after years. Then all of them are floor plans. And oops, oh, it's a shame. Sorry, it's not in in the other one, few other images. But the idea was to expand it, put onto the floor, and to understand all the information. Sometimes it's the stairs. Here, this one was the stairs of the apartment. Over there is the washer, the kitchen. And it was also somewhere, maybe not details, but it was tattoo with the origin, the complete building. In my interest was the idea of this scale, how skin or the bricks or the facade is in the buildings is a little bit like the skin of the body, and you can explore the inside to take the experience of inside and outside. Well, thank you. I think maybe we want to open some questions, maybe some comments, or what, to have a dialogue. Somebody there wants maybe?
Hello, I have a question about the corn project. In this project, you're dealing with the idea of GMO corn because I'm trying to understand. It's because in Mexico City they are importing the corn from the continental U.S. and it's not from Mexico, or what is the relationship that is happening there?
It's a great complete history because the corn was the most important element for the calendar for the alimentation or for the food in Mexico, and then becomes the history of the human, or the mythology said we came from the corn, all the calendar, the parties, the harvest, all this was determined by the corn to cultivate. And all these varieties came from since the Maya, the Aztecs, all the pre-Columbian cultures. And the big thing is the new industry are moving to Mexico to do a bigger production of the one single variety, which is the Monsanto, these big factories, which is really impressive, the capacity to preserve the material, the food, but also is every seed have some copyright. Like when you cultivate once, you never can produce again with the same seed. Even if you have the corn after that, you cultivate and it's not growing again. And then for people who live for this industry, like in the countryside, it's a big impact because they need to pay again for a new seed. And the most difficult thing is the corn, the new one, kill the other specimens. Then is all the problem with the transgenic is also, for example, the bees collect the honey, but the honey is not organic anymore, and then also change the market for the people who produce and sell as organic in Europe, for example. Then it's a big impact, which is important to legalize and control to make a healthy and fair industry. Then, there are many people in lawyers and ONGs which are working to organize a law to protect this. Well, my contribution is just to do some face for these actions, and let's see what happens in the future. I think it's going well. They propose some good strategies, and let's see what happens. Yeah. Somebody else is over there, please.
How many Volkswagen Beetles were there? Because there was a tug of war, and I saw somewhere that there was one that you deconstructed, and I guess there was your Volkswagen there, and then you buried one. So were there 3?
Well, originally was my own car, and it was difficult because I used the car at that time. It was my own car. Then, even it was the reason I had my own do-it-yourself how to repair the car with the diagrams and the beautiful pictures, and then I understand it's possible to buy these pieces here and there and everywhere, and then I have the complete the idea how to do it. Then when I received the invitation, I went to the place where they sold old cars. And then 2 kids only, they helped me to split the car in one day. They separated immediately, like really quick. Then it was mine and the other one. And another piece which I did, it was a trip with my own car to Puebla, where it was the factory. It's still there, the factory of the car, of the Beetle. And I want to do it a kind of mythological trip, going when the elephants going back to the place where they born, or like the mythological stories of the hero who, after all the trip, like Ulysses, going back to the own town. And I asked in the factory if it's possible to going back with my car to bury them as a little bit like a cemetery. And they say, of course not. We don't want to give this image of our factory. And I just keep going a few kilometers farther to the backside, and I asked for a resident over there if I can bury the car there. Then we put the car, the Beatles die, face down, turn out. Then it was a little like this. The poor car, I was very emotional, completely sad, because my car, very old, 83, my father gave it to me, but I thought it was time to change the car. And then I don't want to sail, because I thought it was not proper for a hero. And and I asked some friends to dig the hole. We bury it like this, and we put it into the ground. And we covered with soil and with grass. Then it was nice because at the end was only the 4 wheels on the top. And then it was a beautiful, strange. I need to change my mind and to tell it's not the dead car. It's a seed for the future. It was my own trip to understand. And was 3 cars at that moment, 2 cars at this moment. And I did another one later on for an exhibition copy, which is not for sale. It's just to move from one place to another. And is the 3rd one. Thank you. Please, thank you. Now I like questions.
So the tortilla piece, how do you now keep the bugs from getting it? I mean, did you come up with some kind of coating or solution?
Could you say again? Sorry, I didn't get.
The tortilla piece, how do you keep the bugs away now? Because I've seen that piece in various places, and I see no bugs by it. So.
Well, I put some material like to seal, to make some spray, some varnish, neutral, dark, matte, to don't perceive them, but it's covered with this material. Also, it's good because it makes it a bit more flexible and stronger. Yeah. I wish always like the idea to don't transform something which is essential, which is a corn. Then you can take it and eat it. But for sure, it was important to preserve, and it works. Yeah.
I know that at the Shopkins house they have a piece of corn, and someone you're talking that occasionally you have to replace it. So they have to. Is there a system where they can dry them?
Yeah, Sometimes humidity, which is interesting because if you saw in some museums of technology, they use paper or things like dry like the dry tortillas to test the humidity of the space, because they put it in the balance when it's dry, and this is the 0 point, and when it start to get humid, it start to move lower. Then they have a record like it's 5 degrees or 10 degrees humidity. Then of course it happens with this. The tortilla are isolated with the varnish, but also still absorbing some humidity. Then a little bit becomes curly. But I used to give some extra pieces to change. I think. Oh.
So in the Native American tradition, they have a saying that the idea will grow corn. And it talks about a thought or an idea or a thing that you want to do. Will it grow corn? And that's a good thing. I'm wondering, when you are working with natural materials like that, what goes through your head and what ideas come to your mind while you're working on the piece? Do you focus only on that, or does it expand your mind to other things or make you think of other ideas that you might want to do in other projects?
Yeah, always is interesting this think about materials and local enterprises in our countries, because it's really important for me. The part of the sculpture is this kind of cultural effect which can create in the society or in the context, in the city and different places. And takes for a long time to understand if we as a generation, if we was doing some contemporary global art or local, against the local. And after years, I think everyone understands, like we are doing some language or some international global art, but also very influenced by materials, by interest, by society, by things in local. Then I think it's a nice mix. At the moment, yes, I have some new proposal, which is a kind of archaic structure to contain corn, because the market is very depending of the season of harvest. And then sometimes the people are not in the good conditions, economical conditions, to hold the material to sale for 1 year divided. Then they need to sell everything in a very low price because it's at the same time. Then talking with some ONGs, they say we need to support this chance to contain and to fridge all the corn for a period, and then we can make a nicer, fairly market. Then I design a house in a very traditional way with adobe, with a very cal, with this limestone, to produce one of these containers, and with a fridge inside. Then we are doing also a great exchange. It's a little bit not I don't know if it's artistic or not, but it's a very exciting experience. Also, like the move or create direct connections or links through producers with the people who produce tortilla. I mean, one is the material raw in the countryside, and how in the city we don't have a good high quality tortilla. Then it's interesting just to make, as my chance as an artist, do some bridges to work with the technology, art, whatever, but to create something healthy for everyone. Maybe you want to ask?
You noted in the introduction that you're working both in Berlin and in Mexico. I'm just wondering if your practice is different in the two cities in any way, how you use those two spaces, what influence they're having.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I went to Berlin in the 2006 because it was a residency with a DAD program, which is amazing because they try to invite artists to live in some areas after during the period of divided Germany. And it's super successful. It's a beautiful, amazing community of artists living there, beautiful houses, studios. A lot of factories was transformed in art studios. Then it's very exciting. You can go everywhere, like different bars, restaurants, gardens, and always see some artists talking, and it's very open, the communication. I don't know why. Sometimes it's a bit jealous in different places, and there is a very friendly context. For example, I went once to play ping pong with Henri Sala, and there was the curator of the Pompidou, and she said, "I know you work. Why not let's do something for the future?" And then okay, but playing ping pong then it's like it's like this, very friendly. But after 6 years, we live there. We have also our daughters there. We decide to go back to Mexico. I think I get a little bit nostalgic on missing some relation, and I thought the process was finished. Was very exciting. Was really interesting to live in Europe, to talk with all this generation of artists, and also to understand the system to produce the pieces, which is really different than Mexico. Of course, if you need to do recycling or something, in Europe it's very difficult because they need to pay more for the antique things than for the newest. Then it was really interesting, all the situation. But I miss my friends, my family, my language, and the food and everything. And we decided to go back with our family, and we have a very nice experience. I'm really pleased to be in Mexico again. We are really involved in different projects. My wife also. Then I think it's interesting always to understand and to be open to receive. I think always the work is influenced by the city, by the technology of the city, by the materials. And I have my base in Mexico, but I'm flying to different countries. Now I'm going to Japan, I'm going to Moscow, I'm going to Chile. Then, of course, it's sometimes a little bit crazy because it's 3 completely different contexts, environments. But it's exciting. It's exciting always. Yeah. Maybe the last one.
Can you talk a little bit about Volcano, the display, and where is it? The warehouse.
Yeah. Well, it was a piece which we did in the first in the Fort Worth Museum, and I didn't understand exactly the quality or the characteristics of the space. And the piece was bigger, and my feeling, it was like it was not completely finished. And then, very lucky, Mr. Ruchowski saw the piece, and he said, "Why not? Let's fit into the new space." And then I went. I studied better the situation. And we reconstruct. We thought we can do the same piece in the space, but no, we did it again, and I came to install, and was a very successful piece. I think it is very exciting, crazy, charming piece in the place, and it was interesting. Like I never thought it's a failure if you try something and it doesn't work. I think maybe in the next time you can do it much better. Then I think is the situation for this piece. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, really.